Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Here are the stories we're following today.
Well, John, the S&P 500 is coming off its biggest four-day rally of the year. It's gained 4.5% during that stretch. Yesterday, the NASDAQ 100 climbed 2.5%, and Wall Street's favorite volatility gauge, the VIX, tumbled to around 18. Seema Shah, Chief Global Strategist at Principal Asset Management, is still bullish on the markets.
Even if there is a genuine economic slowdown coming through, given the resilience and the balance sheet strength of households and corporates, is it likely that the Fed can't come to save the U.S. economy with various rate cuts? So actually, I put the chance of recession fairly low, which means that after a bit of volatility and pullback, I think the equity market can still eke out some positive gains.
Principal Asset Management Seema Shah notes that swaps traders have priced in about 40 basis points in Fed cuts in September and a total rate reduction of more than 105 basis points for 2024.
Well, yesterday's rally was fueled in part by producer prices rising less than expected. And later this morning, we're going to get the latest reading on consumer prices. Sarah House is senior economist at Wells Fargo Corporate and Investment Banking.
We're looking for a 0.2% increase on both the headline and the core, so that's in line with the consensus. But I think the details are going to be really important. So to what extent are we still seeing outright goods deflation, and are we seeing more progress on the services side, both in housing but also the non-housing services that have been such a concern for the Fed?
Wells Fargo's Sarah House. Now, if the consensus holds, it would mark the smallest three-month increase for core inflation since early 2021.
And inflation's also in focus in Europe this morning. Let's get the latest on that with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts in London. Ewan.
Nathan and John, the headline rate of UK inflation ticked up in July, but by less than expected, with consumer prices 2.2% higher than a year ago. But it was a sharp drop in services inflation that really got the attention of traders. That measure fell from 5.7% to 5.2%. Core inflation also fell to its lowest since September 2021. The better than expected data saw investors fully price two more quarter-point cuts in UK interest rates this year. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thanks, Ewan. And staying in Europe, shares of UBS up almost 2%. The Swiss bank posting higher than expected profit in the second quarter as strong client inflows and investment banking revenue helped bolster Chief Executive Officer Sergio Armati's efforts to return capital to shareholders a year after completing the takeover of Credit Suisse. The bank says it's on track for pre-merger levels of profitability, something Sergio Armati tells Bloomberg he can deliver.
Of course, it's going to take a lot of time to restore the profitability because the amount of tasks to be done is huge, but I'm confident that we are on a good way to deliver.
But despite Sergio Armati's optimism, UBS says it also expects to book another $1.1 billion in integration-related expenses in the third quarter.
In Asia, John, Japan is going to be looking for a new leader once again. Fumio Kishida is withdrawing from his ruling LDP party's leadership race in September. That paves the way for someone else to become Japan's premier. The successor would be the third prime minister for the country since Shinzo Abe stepped down in 2020.
Now to the latest from the Middle East. The United Nations Security Council held a meeting on the tensions in the region as Israel waits for a potential reprisal attack from Iran. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield repeating calls for a ceasefire deal in Gaza.
We've called on both sides to resume urgent discussion on Thursday, August 15th, in Doha or Cairo to close all remaining gaps and commence implementation of the deal without further delay.
Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield says a ceasefire is the best way to bring immediate relief to the people in Gaza. Meantime, the Biden administration has approved a more than $20 billion weapons sale to Israel. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Roz Matheson.
Well, this is the approval of a big defence deal that we knew was in the works, and it involves up to 50 fighter jets, F-15 fighter jets, upgrades for existing fighter jets, everything from vehicles, ammunition, radar equipment. It's a big deal. It's got a lot in it, but the reality is that these planes are not going to come at least until 2029, so there's some years away.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson reports the U.S. paused weapons shipments to Israel in May over concerns they could be used against civilians in Gaza. Two key Democrats dropped their opposition to this weapons sale in June.
Well, John, a progressive member of Congress who has been outspoken against Israel's conduct in Gaza has won her primary in Minnesota. With 99% of the votes counted, Democrat Ilhan Omar defeated former Minneapolis Councilmember Don Samuels 56.2% to 42.9%. Omar told her supporters her campaign was about joy.
We know it is joyful to want to live in a peaceful and equitable world. So I am incredibly honored by this victory tonight.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's victory bucks a trend for progressives in Congress. Two other members of the so-called squad, New York's Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush of Missouri, lost their primaries. Unlike those races, pro-Israel groups decided not to get seriously involved in the Minnesota race.
And turning back to the markets now, Nathan, shares of Alphabet down almost 1% in early trading. The Justice Department is considering whether to force Alphabet's Google to break up. More from Bloomberg's Amy Morris in Washington.
Officials with the DOJ are considering what would be a rare bid to break up a big tech company after a landmark court ruling found that company monopolized the online search market. Sources tell Bloomberg that less severe options include forcing Google to share more data with competitors and measures to prevent it from gaining an unfair advantage in AI products. Now, even if it does not pursue a breakup, the government will likely seek a ban on the type of exclusive contracts that were at the center of its case against Google. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. Meantime, a merger is getting closer, perhaps, in the grocery aisle. We're watching shares of Kellanova. They're up about 7%. The Wall Street Journal is reporting Mars is expected to unveil a nearly $30 billion deal for the food maker today. Kellanova was spun off from Kellogg last year. Its brands include Pop-Tarts, Pringles, and Cheez-Its.
And activist investors pushing for sweeping changes at Southwest Airlines. Elliott Investment Management has nominated 10 of its own candidates to the board of the struggling carrier. They include the former heads of Virgin, WestJet, and Air Canada. Elliott has previously demanded the ouster of Southwest Airlines CEO Bob Jordan. And that brings us to 5:08 on Wall Street. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, John. The United Auto Workers Union has filed federal labor charges against both Donald Trump and Elon Musk. The charges are tied to particular comments made during Trump's X interview with Musk on Monday. UAW President Shawn Fain.
The rich keep getting richer at the expense of the working class, and people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they sneer at labor law, but they don't care about labor law because they don't care about working class people.
A senior advisor for the Trump campaign released a statement saying, in part, the lawsuit is a shameless political stunt to erode President Trump's overwhelming support among America's workers. Hunter Biden is facing new criticism this morning. The New York Times reports that the president's son wrote a letter to the U.S. ambassador to Italy in 2016 to seek help for a foreign business venture. Hunter Biden's lawyer called the letter to the ambassador a proper request and insisted no project materialized. Tropical storm Ernesto is expected to grow to a hurricane as it churns in the Caribbean. Officials in Puerto Rico closed schools and opened shelters. Ernesto is on a path toward Bermuda. Daryl Jastian with the Virgin Islands Territorial Emergency Management Agency.
The hurricane watch is being issued for U.S. Virgin Islands, the Burgess Virgin Islands, Vieques, and Culebra. They anticipate a rapid intensification.
Just days ago, Debbie passed through the area, leaving storm damage. Opening statements are expected to begin today in the murder trial of a Las Vegas area politician accused of killing an investigative reporter. Prosecutors accuse former Clark County Public Administrator Robert Tellis of killing Las Vegas Review-Journal reporter Jeff German in September of 2022. Loyola Law School professor and former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson.
The allegations are that the politician, the defendant here, Robert Tellis, was upset at a reporter who had said negative things about him. And in fact, that seems to have been the motive alleged for this crime.
Former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson. Former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner was picked as the Democrats' nominee to succeed the late U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who died last month of pancreatic cancer. Turner will be appearing on the November ballot after securing the most support from local Democratic precinct chairs. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. Yeah, it's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, and for that, we say good morning to John Stashower.
All right, John, had the White Sox won last night. That would have been 2 wins in 2 nights after 1 win the previous month. Didn't happen. Yankees won 4-1 in Chicago thanks to Nestor Cortez, who threw 7 scoreless innings, and Juan Soto, who provided the entire Yankee offense. He was the only Yank to have an extra base hit. Soto had the best home run hitting game of his career. 2-run shot to left field, 3rd inning solo blast, also the opposite way of the 5th. Solo home run to right in the 7th. Actually had a chance in the 9th for a 4-home run game. He now has 33 home runs, and his teammate Aaron Judge has 42. Here's Soto on the 2 of them.
We just come in here and try to do our jobs at the end of the day, you know. It's really impressive what we've been doing, but at the end of the day, we forget about what we've done in the past. We try to come every day, try to focus in that day and try to win games. So for us, it's really good that you guys appreciate everything that we do, but definitely we come in here every day hungry for more.
Yankee win coming after news of Jazz Chisholm's elbow injury. Suffered Monday night on a head-first slide home. He's going to have further tests, but the MRI is going to land Chisholm on the injured list with surgery an option. Chisholm's been a nice addition since the trade with Miami. The Orioles lost to Washington 9-3. The Yanks are back ahead of Baltimore by a half game at Citi Field. Oakland beat the Mets 9-4. Paul Blackburn, facing his old team, gave up 6 earned runs. Mets in their last 4 games have been outscored 31-5. J.J. McCarthy, the former Michigan quarterback, drafted in the first round by Minnesota, is going to miss the start of the season due to a knee injury. Vikings had already planned to have the veteran Sam Darnold be the Week 1 starting QB. The 49ers appear closer to pulling the trigger on a trade of wideout Brandon Ayuk to Pittsburgh. Terms have been agreed to. Now it's just a question of if the Niners make the move. Ayuk, unhappy with his contract, wants a trade. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. John and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager on a morning of big bank earnings. UBS posted higher than expected profit in the second quarter as investment banking revenue and progress in the integration of Credit Suisse helped CEO Sergio Armati's efforts to return capital to shareholders. Sergio Armati joined Bloomberg's Francine Longqua to talk about the results and how higher volatility could be good for client portfolios. Let's listen in.
For the markets and for many investors, what happened early on this month has been a wake-up call, right? So, I mean, you look at the magnitude of the movements should make people think carefully about having a proper diversification and being very thoughtful about the way you invest money. So in that sense, the fact that we have basically made back everything within 1 week or 2 cannot be taken as a temporary issues. In my point of view, one has to really think that probably is a sign of some elements of fragility in the system.
But does it get easier as maybe we get a Fed cut, or does it get more complicated as we go to the U.S. election?
But look, when central bank cuts, it depends how they cut and why they cut. So if of course there is now capacity probably to accommodate cuts based on lower inflation. But it's also, we need to watch exactly also what are the underlying economic drivers, and to the extent that the Fed is forced to cut more aggressively because of economic downturns, that would not really be good for the market. So we need to really watch why rates would come down and how quickly they come down. In general, we do expect and we see room for a potential rate cuts in the foreseeable future, but I wouldn't really be in the camp of predicting that the Fed will go as far as the market wants the Fed to go.
But there's been a lot of focus on private markets. How does that interplay actually change, and what does it mean for UBS?
No, the big change in client behaviors we saw in the last 24 months was clearly more diversification towards fixed income and so on and so forth. When rates comes down, of course, maybe part of it will go to search for higher yield maybe in private credit, but not only. But we do believe that as rates comes down, you will see also potentially people moving back to more alternative assets, and also, which is important to understand, the headwinds we face in the industry, but also at UBS in NII, in margins on interest rates, will be also offset by clients taking more leverage potentially. So it depends how it plays out. It depends what are the underlying economic dynamics.
But so do you worry that there could be a systemic risk or semi-systemic risk?
I don't think so. No, I don't think I don't see systemic risk, but volatility high volatility doesn't mean that you have systemic risks.
But what does it mean? High volatility means you need to be on the right side of the trade.
Higher volatility, I mean, to be honest, I think if you look at high volatility can be an absolute or a relative concept. So because we have seen so low volatility in the last few quarters, I do believe that we're going to see higher volatility. If this is very high and permanently high, it's another matter, but I do believe we're going to see more volatility.
So it can't be quarterly results if I don't ask you about hiring or actually job losses. Can you give us an update on what the next 6 and then 12 months will bring?
Well, you saw that the restructuring and fixing the elements of problems in the integration are unfortunately driving job losses. We took down around 3,000 headcount this quarter, so I think that we will continue to have to do that in order to restore the profitability UBS had before the acquisition.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.